There were 5 rows left for me in my uncle's summer cottage. But I'm not a child anymore, and I've never needed to sleep on a bed propped up on bricks. The savanna beauty of the high veld is breathtaking. Turning off the road onto a narrow track made by nothing more than the indentations of tires, I watched a single, heavily laden storm cloud roll along the shadow valley ahead of me, shadowing and blurring the space below it with a flash summer storm. Far away, across the grassland dotted by diminutive trees, were mountains in faded blues. I smiled to myself. This was what I wanted to paint. This was why I'd escaped Johannesburg and reached out to my uncle, asking to borrow his remote holiday cottage for a 2-month retreat. I wanted to paint the veld, landscapes and oil paint, grittily layered and scraped away for detailed tall blade of grass after tall blade of grass. I wanted to paint animals, an impala hopping along, an advancing herd of elephants, birds in the sky, and if I was lucky, a lion snoozing under a bush, or a white rhino glancing innocently up at me, an ear twitching. Turning my music up so it blared through the car speakers, I trundled along the little track, headed for the small rendezvous currently getting pelted by a 3 p.m. storm. I rolled the windows down in my 4-wheel drive just to catch that first scent of the wet earth after the storm. My uncle's rendezvous, smack in the middle of wild veld, was perfectly rustic with a few more modern additions. The circular cottage was painted a burnt red, its roof thatch. Tacked on the side was a bathroom, accessible from outside only. A rusted water trough was out front, left over from some historic herd of cows or sheep. And round back, a stone shed sported solar panels and a hot water tank on the roof. And there was where my uncle had told me I could find the generator if the solar panels weren't enough. The nearest human was likely some 20 kilometers away, and as far as I could tell, there were no lions ready to ambush me. All the same, I grabbed my 9mm from the glove compartment before hopping out of my car. At home, I felt okay to leave it in a locked drawer of my desk. Out here, a woman alone? No way. It was going in its holster where I could grab it at a moment's notice. The rainstorm had passed already. Leaving the numerous provisions I brought in the car, I caught up the keys my uncle had given me and headed for the rendezvous's door. The door unlocked with 4 separate bolts, bars on all the windows. Yet my uncle had left it unoccupied for 3 weeks. I locked my car, stuffed my keys in a pocket, and withdrew my gun before twisting the door handle. I needn't have worried. Nothing jumped out at me. The rendezvous was just as I remembered it from the times I'd visited with my family. Consisting of only one circular room, the floor was colorfully tiled, the walls inside painted a cream white, and the beams holding up the thatch roof visible above. The side of the bed was pushed up against one curved wall, a small side table crammed in the gap between. The cooking area was on one side, made of homemade counters and cabinets, and a wood-burning cook stove I'd have to learn how to use. Paintings added flair to the walls, large multi-paned windows, and a beautiful specimen of a fruit bowl on the provincial dining table. It was good. I'd have to hand-wash my clothes, and I had no self-service. But it was exactly what I wanted. But it was exactly what I'd wanted. An escape. Pinned by the fruit bowl, my uncle had left instructions for me. I leaned against the table and, finding the instructions covered 4 separate pages, snickered to myself. My uncle had written everything down, from how to work the generator and stove, through safety notes, to where was the nearest spot to buy food or get phone reception. On the last page, there was a bulleted list headed by the words, "And Chicky, these are the rules. I tell you, don't come crying to me if you don't follow them." Do not remove the bricks from under the bedposts. Don't leave out any food except curdled milk. Keep a fire lit all night. At night, hang up the amulet on the hook over the door. And put down the trap outside the door. They're in the left-hand cabinet. If you have any problems, wash with the bath salts I left in the bathroom. I put the papers down and went to check the bed, pulling the blankets up to see the bed's legs. Yep. All 4 of them are propped up on 2 bricks each. I let the blankets fall. My uncle was like anyone's uncle. He had views I didn't share. I had not thought, however, that his views extended to believing in the Takalash of all things. The revelation surprised me into laughter. Some people, probably many, do believe in the Takalash. For the rest of us, it's a fun story to tell kids. Don't get out of bed at night, or the Takalash will get you. The most fearsome Takalash I'd known had been my neighbor's guard dog, named after the legendary sprite. The legend of the Takalash takes on many forms. It may kill you in your sleep, or grab your ankles as you get out of bed. Or it may give you wonderful dreams, often sex dreams. Though if you don't drive the Takalash away in time, your life will be ruined. It could be mischievous, or evil, thought to be created by a witch doctor and existed as a result of jealousy. Of all of them, the rule I recognized was to keep the bed up on bricks. The Takalash was too small to reach you in your sleep if you did. Or at least that's what I'd heard when my parents had joked with me about it when I was a child. They just laughed when my childhood self had asked why then my bed had never been put up on bricks. Putting it down to my uncle having spent too much time alone out here, I got up and went to find the gun safe. It was hidden below a counter behind a draped tea towel. I followed the code my uncle had given me when he'd passed over the keys, punching it into the safe, then swung the door open. I'd expected it to be empty, ready for my Glock. It wasn't. I blinked at the gun already in there, then pulled a face. I see the point in guns. My parents have one. I have one. But there were pistols and shotguns, and then there were notorious assault rifles. The gun in the safe was a bloody AK-47. At least, I was pretty sure it was. And I was also pretty sure it wasn't a gun my uncle was technically allowed to have. I swung the safe door back shut, my Glock still in its holster, and decided I'd come back to the gun safe later. Bringing my stuff in from the car, I took the opportunity to check out the rest of the place. The shed was likewise heavily locked, and when I finally got the door open, it was to the confronting sight of an array of animal skulls hung from the ceiling to dangle over my head. Antelope, horse, cow, small creatures, massive ones, feline ones, and something I couldn't quite identify. It looked perhaps like a small primate, though its jawbone seemed to have been blown off. I was learning more and more about my uncle by the minute, and I wasn't too sure I liked what I was learning. Beneath this unsettling art installation was the generator. Piled up behind it was a massive stack of ancient farming equipment and, stuffed in further away from the generator, enough firewood to keep me cooking for months to come. I took in the tools with appreciation, and the wash basin, washboard, and old-school mangle with rather a lot less. I found the bath salts my uncle had mentioned in the serviceable bathroom. They were in a jar home-labeled bath salts. And the smell of them when I screwed off the lid, well, I don't think it was just salt. Rather than white granules, the mixture in the jar looked like fraught chutney. Tarry and gritty and honking like rotten carrion. I screwed it back shut and stuffed it away under the sink. Whatever weird stuff my uncle believed, there was no way I was washing myself with that. It was the first of the rules I wasn't going to follow. Between moving my stuff in and working out the stove, I came to sunset, sweaty and tired. I'd thrown all the windows open to vent the extra heat the stove created, and was not going to leave the fire lit all night. The summer heat may dissipate overnight, but not enough for that. I didn't believe in amulets, and when I found the one in the left-hand cabinet, I didn't want to hang that up either. It was a collection of animal horns, small bones, dangling metal bits, and hollowed stone strung out on a leather thong. The skulls in the shed had made the place feel enough like a poacher's hideout. I doubted my uncle had some rhino horn trade going on, but poaching and canned hunts were a dark mark on this country, and even just being made to think of it was distasteful to me. The trap, however, wasn't so offensive. It was made of thorns, each as long as my hand, arranged in a spiral and tied together like the world's least welcoming doormat. Any animal with small feet likely wasn't about to be deterred. They could just step around the thorns. But I suppose it would cause a bigger creature significant pain if they stepped on it. So my attitude tolerant, I stuck it outside the rendezvous door and, following another rule, made sure to clear away any food remains. I wouldn't take the bed down off its bricks either. As tempting as a great sex dream was, if there was somehow a taklush, having the bed elevated was the most common and likely then effective rule. Readying for bed and more reassured by the heavily bolted door and barred windows, I opened the gun safe again and put my gun in. My Glock 17 looked petite beside the AK-47, but I shook it off and shut the safe door. Then I got into the bed on bricks, and was out almost the moment my head hit the pillow. In the early morning needing the loo, I thankfully remembered the nasty welcome mat on my way to the bathroom. I changed where my foot was going a second before I stepped down on massive thorns in bare feet. A hasty hop over the mat, landing on the dirt outside, shocked me awake enough to really appreciate the African sunrise, making the sky glow pink and gold over the mountains. I watched it, feeling how huge and open the sky was out here, for as long a moment as I could, before I had to race for the toilet, my bladder fit to burst. In the morning, my growing misgivings of the previous evening evaporated. There was no way my uncle was hunting endangered animals. He was a staunch hater of poachers. He was just a bit weird, and liked displaying animal skulls he found in the veld. I made myself eggs, luxuriating in the affluent provision of time provided by this being the first full day of my retreat. From the shed, I produced a well-used charcoal barbecue and a folding chair and sat outside eating my breakfast in the morning wilderness. I heaved my easel outside to paint what I saw. The barbecue I'd used as a table doubled once I'd stuck a plywood board on top of it as a side table for my paints. I'd thought to paint the mountains in the distance, the grassland in the foreground, with the aim to add to it a flash summer storm when one rolled into the valley. Instead, I found my focus captured by the footprints around the water trough. It half full with collected rain. My paintbrush sketched out my own footprints, where I'd run right through other tracks on my way to the loo that morning. It wasn't something I'd noticed then, but the sunlight picked out the impressions of cloven hooves in the dirt. A group of impalas having gone to drink from the trough sometime in the night. Without realizing it, I'd skidded several of their footprints into obscurity that morning. I shifted my easel aside to see more of the trough, and the earth before it, wondering how best to capture the impressions in the rusty dirt. Doing so revealed another set of footprints. These were shallower, as though made by a lighter creature. Up near the trough, not yet evaporated by the sun, were discs in the sand where droplets of water had fallen around the footprints. The tread marks missing spots where sand would have clung to the creature's wet feet. Ostrich, perhaps? I thought, peering at the animal's tracks. I found it funny to imagine an ostrich, large and stern-looking, having a bath in the rusted water trough, getting out dripping with water and stalking away. Though I'd wanted to paint the summer storms, I spent that day immortalizing the cross-section of different footprints before the water trough, lit by the low morning sun, and the next, waiting for the first to dry a bit, painting the rendezvous itself. That first night, I'd managed not to step on the thorn trap. The night after, I managed it as well. On the third morning, waking up once again at sunrise, needing the toilet, I wasn't so clever. My expletives broke the dawn quiet. I will swear to my dying day it startled a load of birds into the sky. Groggy and stumbling, grumbling aloud to the lone rendezvous about the toilet being accessible only from outside, I shoved the door open and landed a barefoot straight onto those thorns. This time, a quick reposition of my foot did nothing but drag the nasty welcome mat along with it. I could feel it jitter against the sand. No, 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 no! I whined, steadying myself against the doorframe as I cautiously lifted my foot up. The trap came with it for about 5 inches before finally choosing to part company with my flesh. My teeth grit. I grimaced as I pulled my foot up so I could see it by the low light of the growing dawn. 2 holes. One small on the edge of my foot, the other deep and welling only slowly with blood. Ow! I yelled. The sound seemed to ricochet off the distant mountains. Wobbling on one foot, I bent down, grabbed up that damn trap, and hurled it as far away as I could. Then, tears in my eyes, I had to decide whether I'd rather pee first or dress my foot. Miserable and hopping, I made it to the loo and just stuck my foot in the shower. Bandaged foot flat on the sand outside, I went back to work on my painting of the footprints, with only a small photo on my phone to guide me. My hopping that morning had disturbed any footprints the night would have left. By the time I caught that change in the air that indicated a coming afternoon storm, my foot was aching badly enough that I didn't want to keep standing on it. Sitting just inside the rendezvous door with my easel didn't make it much better. In fact, I was pretty sure no longer being stood on it made my foot throb worse. I watched the rain come down outside, wishing I could appreciate it more. The storm rumbled and poured overhead, the thatch rumbling with it above me. My painting was becoming something I was angry with. The light and shadow of it just not working. And I had no way to make the photo I was using any bigger. My back ached as I arched up and sat on the kitchen chair to reach the canvas. I pinched my shoulder blades together, irritated with myself for not enjoying this retreat as much as I wanted to. Irritated with my uncle for being stupid about childhood bedtime stories. The storm poured, then passed overhead, to drench another part of the veld. I didn't try to move back outside. It was wet and I was sore. I stuck my paintbrush aside, frustrated, and watched the world beyond the door lighten from its warm storm gray. It took me a couple of moments for my ears to tune in and pay attention to the sound of splashing. Slumping in my chair, gazing aimlessly at the wet dirt, I listened to the splashing, not ready to make anything of it yet. A knock against old metal made a reverberant rung. I blinked and got up, wincing when my sore foot pressed against the tiles. Limping slightly, I approached the open door and looked out. The splashing stopped. Confused, I looked for what might have made the sound. The wilderness around me, recovering from the deluge, was empty. But it smelled great. I leaned against the doorframe, finding that first ounce of enjoyment I'd wanted in the afternoon. A rustling pulled my attention to the side. There was movement. Something small and brown. A scuttle forward, then a hasty stop and stare. I started to breathe more quietly and took stock of the door, ready to swing it shut. I didn't want to. I'd rather stand there and watch, take photos for later, absorb the sight. But baboons were a big problem if they got inside your house. And it wasn't just the one, it never was. They moved in groups. I watched 2 join the first, one with her baby cradled to her chest. Then another 3 came racing up, slowing to a stop behind the first few. Standing watchful, ready to head forward as the rest of the troop caught up, sprinting over the wet grass. They were clever beasts, scratching, nattering, blasé, and mischievous little buggers. And as they were darting glances between me and the water trough, I was pretty sure they were after a drink. As unobtrusively as I could, I reached for my phone. I got my fingers on it as the baboons started forward, advancing together on the trough. There. I got one photo of their cautious approach, then another. With a sudden uproar of screeching, the baboons scattered, nothing more than fleeing hops through the long grass and tails whipping away to indicate they'd ever been there. I lowered my phone, bewildered. I certainly hadn't scared them away, and I didn't see what had. But there was a noise. A low grumble, barely audible. I picked it up more and more. It seemed to rattle at something deep inside me, like it had found a thread of memory to rattle. I was pretty sure I'd heard that sound before, yet that was all it was. A sense of recognition. I didn't know what caused the recognition or why, but I heard the splashing again. Splishing and sploshing like water being luxuriantly swished around inside the trough. There was nothing there. It didn't matter how long I stared at the trough, I saw nothing that could be causing the sound. But craning to look over the lip of the trough, I did see the water moving inside it. The splashing and low grumbling had lasted for a little while, then just gone away. I looked later when the ground had dried a bit for a hole in the rusted metal of the trough, thinking perhaps the sounds had been caused by water escaping it. I even looked for some fish that may have fallen out of the storm cloud. I found neither a miracle fish nor hole. The trough was still holding its water, calm and unoccupied. The grumbling came back to me that night. In my dreamland, it was coming from the generator in my parents' house, rumbling away to make it through the latest blackout as we laughed and chatted together for our family lunch. I woke up feeling warm and at ease, momentarily forgetting my sore foot and the stiff neck I was developing. I was reminded of that the moment I got up to go to the loo. "This is cock," I muttered to myself, hobbling to the door, my foot throbbing badly. "It's just cock." The dreams were back that night, and each of the nights afterwards, always with the low grumble of a generator in the background. Every one seemed a memory, one I'd forgotten or just not thought about for years. Until the dreams recalled them like snippets from home videos. Waking up early one morning as a child, my parents already awake and cooking breakfast. The generator humming away in the garage down the corridor. My teenage self chatting with a friend out in the garden not far from the garage. Laughing with my uncle and aunts on the deck. The generator ensuring our dinner roast kept cooking in the oven. That I had so many memories of times we'd used that generator said a lot about the sorry state of electricity provision in this country. But I didn't mind the dreams. In fact, as the days went by, finishing the first week of my retreat and starting into the next, they became something I looked forward to. It was likely that a part of it was loneliness, though it took me a while to admit that. I had long thought myself someone who didn't need as much company as others, who could happily live months out on my own. But there was an undeniable comfort as the silence and solitude of the lone rendezvous in the high veld went on, and seeing the smiles and hearing the laughter of my friends and family in my dreams. And the other part of it was that being asleep was an escape from the ache-fueled frustration of my waking hours. And that generous provision of time ahead I'd enjoyed on my first day here was already feeling threatened as time went on. Days ticking by with me fighting with every effing painting I touched. Nothing looked the way I wanted it to. Everything coming out childish, uninspired, drab, and clumsy. Even my painting of the footprints before the trough, which had started off so inspired, was something I'd stuck under the bed where I couldn't see it or punch a hole through the canvas. And as my foot started slowly but surely to heal, the agonizing knots in my back and neck took over. Were I about 7 centimeters shorter, my easel would be perfect. Were I painting in the fits and starts I was used to working around work and life, it would be fine. But hour after hour stood before that easel was killing my back. I had started to get nauseous from a neck so stiff I couldn't move my head out of a hunched position without zings of pain. Sitting on a chair before it was no better, though it did offer me the chance to strain up instead of hunch down. Flopping the painting flat on the plywood-covered braai outside didn't do it either, and neither did sitting arse down on the dirt outside with the canvas propped up on a chair. There was just nothing that felt natural about any of it. I groaned, low and irritated, and glowered at my painting. The chair made it too high as well, and my knees were still protesting from when I tried to sit on my heels to reach. On top of that, the baboons I painted looked like stuffed toys. Cursing, I flopped onto my back in the rusty dirt and shut my eyes against the midday sun. Maybe I should just change my reason for being out here. Tell people instead of coming to paint, my aim was simply to get a deep tan. I could succeed at that one at least. The distant sound of movement in long grass had me opening my eyes and slowly and carefully looking over. I froze, barely daring to move lest I scared it off, and watched the zebra plod slowly up to the washing line, my drying clothes flapping lightly in the breeze. The sun beating down from above, its light a pinkish orange, the juxtaposition of wild and man-made, stirred that inspiration I thought was dying an infuriating death inside of me. Trying hard not to startle the beast, I got a wealth of photos captured on my phone, then snuck into the Rondevelle to fetch a fresh canvas. For the time the zebra was there munching grass around my washing line, I barely felt the knots in my back and neck, my paintbrush flying over the canvas, catching the pose of the zebra before it moved, splashing paint onto the fabric to capture the colors. But it did move off, and when I remembered my aches, it took a lot of courage to straighten my back again and raise my head. I pinched an eye shut, my teeth clenched as the mad zings of pain rocketed down my spine. Dumping my brush aside, I stepped back, pinching my neck muscles with vengeful fingers. Ow, I grumbled, and moving my neck cautiously, eyed the bed. It was the logical option. I could try to prop the easel up on firewood, but then it'd wobble. Bricks were the best option, and they were each about 7 centimeters high. It'd just be one layer of bricks, I told myself, and I could put them back before I left so my uncle would never know. I did take the bricks, and that one layer of bricks stuck under the easel made all the difference in the world. And once I'd done it, the other 4 bricks under the bed felt like fair game when, evening, I got tired of standing before the easel. So I pinched those 2, shifted the easel off its makeshift stand, and piled them up 2 bricks high under a chair. That worked a dream, and for the first night in a while, I smiled happily as I painted, loving the genteel face of the zebra appearing under my paintbrush. I went to bed that night cheerful and satisfied, and that way you can be when you left up on the easel something you'd smiled at before sticking your paintbrush in the terps for the night. I lingered in the feeling of my luck changing, and got into a position on the bed that would hopefully ease the knots in my neck and back. Comfortable enough, I shut my eyes and saw my painting behind my eyelids, picking out where to add to it, what I wanted where. The windows had bars and fly screens over them. I had left all of them open in the Rondevelle. Drifting in on a gentle zephyr were the quiet sounds of splashing. I wasn't interested in getting up to see what was causing it this time. So I just let my sleepy mind absorb it like a memory of having a luxurious bath. The bath moved to a bedtime, cozy and warm in fresh sheets. My small body curled around the fluffy cheetah I slept with. I rubbed my face against the little toy, reveling in the comforting feeling of its fur against my lips and forehead. The lullaby being sung to me, its tone gentle and loving, made me think of playing in open fields, hide and seek with my cousins, homemade donuts in the shade of a tree. Much bigger and in rather a lot of pain, I jolted awake in the rendezvous bed. Disoriented, I thought I heard a scuffle over the tiles as I launched for the bedside lamp and flicked it on. Nothing there. The rendezvous was locked, barred, and fly-screened against anything that may want to come in. Or go out. But that didn't stop me from feeling like something was there. Like something wasn't right. And I had a strong sense that, if I stepped out of bed, something would grab my ankles. Taking the bricks away had put takalash on my brain, I told myself. I was being stupid. Just a scared child in the night. And that was exactly how I felt. Like the child I had once been. My parents having fun at my expense as they told me spooky stories about the takalash, before laughing when I, way back then, believed them. Yet those stories had included tales about having good dreams when a takalash was targeting you. And I'd been getting good dreams. They weren't the sex dreams you usually heard whispered about with the takalash, but they were good. They were dreams of things that felt like memories, that otherwise I couldn't possibly have recalled. That dream had made me feel like I was 3 years old. Jittering slightly, I got out of bed by hopping clear away from it and the treacherous gap of darkness underneath. Took a breath to steady my nerves and got down on my hands and knees to look under the bed. Nothing. Just the painting I'd shoved under there. A sense of something behind me had me whipping around, but there was nothing there either. All the same, sleep felt, in the middle of that night, like it was off the table for at least a good few hours. So I fetched my gun out of the safe, wanting it like the child I had once been had wanted the security of my cheetah toy. Put on some music and went back to painting. It was only late the next day that I noticed a small scratch on the side of my big toe. If I'd felt the sting before, then it hadn't registered between the pain in my back and the single-minded focus I had on my painting. I only noticed it when I went to change the bandage on my foot that evening. Unwinding the old bandage stained with dirt on the bottom, my foot up in the kitchen sink, it took me then even a few moments to notice the scratch on my toe. I washed it off, checked how deep it was, and decided it wasn't a big deal. The scratch was shallow. I didn't know when I'd acquired it, but that wasn't surprising. Walking around barefoot outside, what I was surprised about was that I hadn't scratched up my feet more. Yet there was a niggling worry about the scratch in the back of my head. A niggling worry I dismissed. I hadn't thought of last night's fright at all that day, having woken up late and slept a dreamless sleep once I'd gone back to bed. I'd kept my gun on me, but just gotten down to my painting, watching it take shape before me as the congos drowned out the silence with their dulcet tones. I'd kept my gun on me, but just gone down to my painting, watching it take shape before me as the congos drowned out the silence with their dulcet tones and driving drum beats. I saw no new animals that day, likely driven away by the music blaring from my Bluetooth speakers. It couldn't have been helped. I'd needed the silence gone that day, and it sung along as I painted. But with that first night, I'd set a precedent with waking in fear from good dreams. I woke with a start the next night too. In the moment my unconscious recognized that I was enjoying the memory of the holiday in Namibia I'd taken some 4 years ago. It had been a raucous good time with 2 4-wheel drives and 6 friends from university. The next night wasn't any better, nor the night after that or the one after that. As much as I tried to talk myself down and explain aloud to myself that I was inventing a fear of good dreams, it didn't stop me from waking scared and jittery from them. I ran the battery on my Bluetooth speakers down, listening to music or podcasts I had saved on my phone in an attempt to fall back asleep. And when the speakers died halfway through podcasters reading me fun facts, I switched off my phone, tucked my gun under the covers beside me, and started singing Thula Baba to myself. And that worked. And apparently that lullaby still held sway over me. It had always worked when I was a kid. Over the next few nights, between not hearing any more scuttling in the night and using that song, I became so desensitized to the fear of good dreams. 2.5 weeks into my retreat, 2 good paintings drying against the wall and 5 terrible ones hidden under the bed, partly in an attempt to stop anything nefarious hiding under there. I slept through the night and woke up without any memory of a dream. I'd stopped playing music throughout the day. My speakers and phone charging from the solar panels. I sat that afternoon in the doorway of the rendezvous, happy as my 3rd good painting took shape under my brush. I had finally managed to paint the rain. Thick paint dressed the canvas, skidded along the fabric in a gritty cross-hatching of brush strokes. Something I'd never done before, but gave a sense of the beautiful power of the storm that was pattering overhead. Featuring that burnt orange gray that was stormlight, mixed just right on my palette. Humid air blew in at me through the open door, making my hair tassel. I put my brush down and glanced from outside to the canvas, wondering what I wanted to add to the painting. The thought that occurred to me instead was that I wanted a glass of wine. A celebration, in the form of cracking open a bottle of Chenin Blanc. Standing on the earth, sky is leaving us behind. I hummed to the pattering of raindrops, wine glass in one hand, paintbrush in the other. My back didn't hurt anymore, and I bounced along to the song that felt heavenly inside my head. Made our hearts feel as strong as the African day. I may be a terrible singer, but there was no one around to hear as the storm cloud passed overhead, and I belted, "Bye bye December, African rain." It made me laugh with giddy glee, and I refilled my wine glass before returning to my painting. I had no normal dinner that night. I trusted myself to paint tipsy. I didn't trust myself to use the cook stove tipsy. So I nibbled on bread dipped in olive oil and dukkha, and when that was finished, dabbled in a plate of soft cheese and crackers. Days of poor sleep and wine had made me sleepy well before my usual bedtime. I closed and locked the door, put my finished painting safely away on a shelf, and crawled into bed. The splashing in the trough outside was back as I lay there. I tuned it out, singing my lullaby to myself, and was soon off to sleep. It wasn't into a dreamless sleep that I slipped this time. But it wasn't a normal memory either. Rather, it was a memory of a dream I'd had so long ago, I'd forgotten it completely. I'd recognized that near instantly, like smelling something you knew before you worked out why. I was aware enough in the dream to choose to pay attention to the sense of undeniable familiarity. The déjà vu, even as dream me revolved on the spot, my white skirts billowing out around me, a circlet of flowers in my hair. A goddess in a field of flowers. There was a man. Long dark hair, leather jacket, walking up the field toward me. He split into a broad smile, and then I was running through a jungle, swinging on a vine just like Jane in Tarzan. I let go and my skirts flew up around me as I fell, my stomach full of butterflies. Graceful and airborne until I wasn't any longer, until I slipped gently into a crystalline pool, bordered on both sides by steep jungle rock. He was there, standing in what was suddenly shallow waters, smiling and topless. And I knew what this dream was. I knew where it was going. And I knew who I'd been when I'd last had it. 13, and sure this was how love worked. I knew I was dreaming. I tried to wake, to shoot upright in bed, but it didn't work. I was running in the dream, or trying to, fighting against what hadn't been a strong current before, but was now. The pool, a swift river, rushing against me as I tried to flee, flinging myself into it and trying to swim instead. Every move was slow, like trying to move and treacle. And then something grabbed my ankle. Sharp teeth bit into my foot and I was up, awake and screeching in the midnight rendezvous. Something else startled at the foot of my bed. I'd kicked out, and now I flew onto my knees, staring into the dark as something went scuttling away. Not quite visible, but distorting the air around it as it moved. Ow! Seemed to be what my mind came up with to scream. It was another couple of heartbeats before I launched over to flick on the light. I stared around. I even hung down to look under the bed. But whatever had been there wasn't any longer. So I freed my legs from the bedclothes and took a look at my foot. Not the bandaged one this time, the other one. My previously unblemished foot sported 3 deep scores in the top of it, like claws had dug into my flesh and just pulled. It was a couple hours still after searching the rendezvous with my gun cocked and ready, and when I found nothing, dressing my foot in the sink, that I thought to pull out the paintings under the bed. I'd had the sense before that something was hiding under there, however wrong that sense had proved. I laid the paintings side by side, taking up all the room under the bed, and the oil paint on those I'd stacked on top wasn't fully dry yet. I no longer thought that sense I'd had was wrong. I sat back on my heels, staring at the 3 paintings I had before me. Across all 3 of them were footprints, sunken into the half-dry paint, ones you could mistake for a young ostrich's. Some light spots able to be guessed were toes. The rest of the foot a lumpy indent. Only, there was no ostrich with feet that big that was fitting under the bed. I waited out the unnerving darkness with my speakers, and the first painting I tried, dry now, of the footprints before the trough. Somehow, painting into that the tracks I could see marched into 3 canvases helped me feel less freaked out about it all. It was in the light of day that I noticed the plate, bearing nothing more than small crumbs now, left on the dining table. My cheese and crackers from the previous night. If I'd remembered correctly, I'd eaten almost all of the cheese, only 1 piece of it and some crackers left. The last rule on my uncle's list: don't leave out any food but curdled milk. I shuddered. With daylight to see by, I bent down, unwrapped the bandage around my foot, and stared at the 3 deep scores on it. It wasn't only the fresh cuts on my foot, though. I turned my foot to the side and looked at my ankle. Those ones were faint there. 2 faded scars I hadn't thought about for nearly 2 decades. Scars that had just become marks of childhood misadventure. All those times I'd run around in shorts and barefoot, needing to be patched up by my mother and her bottle of outdated mercurochrome. But I pulled up the jean cuff on my other leg. On my shin were 3 more scratches, long healed, and nothing more than white lines now.